What's the deal with staplers? They're one of the only office supplies you never end up using at home, and yet, for the next year, I bet you're going to need a stapler for something. I remember in college, I would need to staple all the time, so I bought a stapler, and then miraculously, I just didn't need it as much because I always found my stapling habits being at the library. The moment that I bought a stapler, I didn't need it. Now when I need to staple something, I still can't do it because I can't find the damn thing. So you might be thinking just switch to paper clips, but it's the same thing with them. You get a pack of paper clips, use a couple here and there, and then you're stuck with 72 paper clips on your desk for the next 10 years. It's ridiculous. Are you an everyday nerd? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you don't miss the next episode. Yo, welcome to your Everyday Nerd, the show where I can't do a Jerry Seinfeld impression, but that's my best impression of a Jerry Seinfeld bit. So hopefully that works. I'm your host, Zack Snyder, and today's Throwback Thursday. Happy Thursday. If you're new around here on Thursdays, we take a look at media that happened before the year 2000. So there's this little known show called Seinfeld. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. Well, I've heard about it for most of my life now, but I never really watched it in the entire 22 years I've been alive. I think I may have seen a little bit of it when I was a kid, because I think my parents watched it, but I don't remember anything about it. All I really know is that Mr. B-Movie himself is the subject of the show, and I know of the guy George Costanza. Like, I know his name. I know Kramer's name too, but I don't know anything else about it. Well, until now. But recently, there's been some controversy on YouTube around the show Seinfeld. The channel FBE, or Fine Brothers Entertainment, known for their react videos, where they get together a group of kids, teens, YouTubers, or elders to react to a certain topic. They recently started a new show called Does It Hold Up? Which, by the way, Fine Brothers, I'm going to need to see you in court, because I created a show called Does It Hold Up 8 months ago. If you're going to copyright react, I'm going to copy... The premise behind Does It Hold Up is they get together a group of teens and college students, get them to watch some episodes of a TV show that they've never probably seen, and then they react to some clips talking about whether these episodes hold up in today's standards. So they started with the 90s sitcom Seinfeld, and well, people were not okay with this video. Throughout the video, these people that are around my age talked a lot about how Seinfeld had some controversial subjects, and that the show doesn't hold up strictly because people would be offended by their jokes. A couple days later, H3H3 Productions, one of the channels I really like, posted a reaction video to the FBE video talking about how great Seinfeld is and how these teenagers are just wrong and too sensitive. Then a couple more days later, another channel that I really like called Indie Mouse posts a similar video. Both of these videos are really good and entertaining, so I highly recommend watching them. But what I thought was interesting was that these people were talking about how great Seinfeld was and defending it, while the people on the FBE side were talking about how bad it is since they'd never seen any of them. And there were a couple of kids on there that said, hey, it's a funny show, I like watching it. But for the most part, people were tearing Seinfeld down. So naturally, I was curious and I had to watch some myself because this is a show that I've kind of wanted to watch in the past. I just never had the opportunity to do so. Since I've never seen a full episode, I didn't want to just go watch season 1 or anything. I wanted to get a broad scope. So I watched the exact same episodes that they talked about in the FBE video. And let's skip to the chase. I think these people are wrong. I think they're too sensitive. I think Seinfeld's actually a pretty damn good show. Now, I really like these episodes, and I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be like me saying the show is incredibly great, because these could just be a handful of episodes that the Fine Brothers staff picked that are their best. So I do want to watch more in the future. But what I'm interested in is the fact that the main thing that they criticize in this Fine Brothers video is that Seinfeld's jokes are too controversial and that they could offend somebody, and so that makes the show not hold up to today's standards.
Dude, I'd be offended too.
This episode kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable.
That's legit not funny.
And what's so interesting about this is the fact that there's so many more elements to a show that you should judge to decide whether it holds up or not. It's like looking at a movie that came out in the 1920s and saying, no, it doesn't hold up. It's actually a bad movie just because it had some things that were so akin to the 1920s that are controversial in today's day. But what's even more interesting is the fact that they talk about these jokes like they're in this small little bubble, but they don't talk about the context surrounding it. And it's the context behind the jokes that make them funny. And more importantly, it's the context around the jokes that actually combat the very thing that they find controversial. If it's one thing I learned about the characters in Seinfeld in just these few episodes, is that they're not necessarily good people. They're meant to be laughed at rather than laughed with. For instance, in this season 9 episode, The Merv Griffin Show, Jerry is at his girlfriend's house where he finds out that she has a bunch of collectible toys. These are toys that once belonged to her father, but her father is now dead. So when he asks to play with these toys, it's really insulting to the girl that he's dating. And in the Fine Brothers episode, they actually talk about how, hey, yeah, I'd be offended too if this guy walked into my house trying to play with my toys. That's the joke. That's the main joke. And H3H3 points this out. Indy Mouse points this out.
That's the joke. I repeat, that is the joke.
Dude, I'd be offended too. That's my dead dad's stuff.
That's the joke. Why are you sympathizing with a fictional character in a comedy series?
But what's more important is that it's the beginning of the joke in the episode. It's not the full joke. It's just like a small little part of it. So what ends up happening is that he gives his girlfriend some medicine that knocks her out so that he can play with these toys. After it works once, he continues to do it, telling his friends George and Elaine about it, who then end up doing the exact same thing so that they can go play with a football video game in an easy bake oven. Yes, it's funny to see grown adults play with kids' toys, especially ones that they don't have permission to play with, but they never actually say that this is a good thing that they're doing. In fact, it's actually frowned upon by their other friend Kramer, and that's what makes the whole point of this episode and this joke, like, so apparent. We have this guy who would probably do anything to have sex with somebody, and he's talking about how it would be wrong for Jerry to drug his girlfriend to play with her toys. And this is the genius in this, how this is basically a metaphor for rape. Obviously, it's a much lesser crime here, but if you take out the context of the toys and just show a bunch of scenes of Jerry giving his girlfriend medicine that causes drowsiness, a bunch of turkey because of the tryptophan, and a bunch of wine, then you're going to have a very shocked reaction. Instead, it wraps up this, hey, you probably shouldn't rape anybody message in a different context by showing somebody taking advantage of his girlfriend in a much different way, but still wrong way. You even get the ending that wraps up with Jerry being exposed, where his girlfriend says this,
You think you can drug me and play with my toys? You've got another thing coming, bud.
which he responds with,
What kind of woman drinks an entire box of wine?
they're not talking about rape, but this is victim blaming at its finest. And honestly, it's a bit f***ed up. But it's the way that the show tackles this intense and controversial subject by showing, hey, Jerry's an idiot and a bad person. Don't do anything similar to this whatsoever. It's again laughing at these characters rather than with these characters. So when you have people like reacting to this first scene and saying, hey, that makes me uncomfortable that he wants to play with her toys and that he's drugging her, like, yeah, of course it makes you uncomfortable. It's not like a good thing, but the joke ends up being like Jerry gets owned, like Jerry has his comeuppance happen by the end of the episode. And this actually occurs in about every episode that I had watched. Another episode titled The Cigar Store Indian shows Jerry giving Elaine a cigar store Indian because he's promised her something and then he didn't actually do it. So he wanted to give her a gift. Most people would just give candy or flowers, but he goes and buys a gigantic Indian statue, which is ridiculous in the first place. The problem with this ends up being that one of Elaine's friends is somebody that Jerry's interested in, but she's a Native American, and so he basically loses out on a relationship with her because, you guessed it, racism. Now, is it inherently racist to want a giant Indian statue? I mean, yeah. I think that's pretty obvious, but it's one of those things that Jerry didn't realize was offensive until somebody brought it up. So when you watch the entire episode, you see that there's a couple of moments where Jerry realizes this is wrong, but I'm going to try to dance around this insinuated racism by correcting myself on things that could be seen as offensive.
You can't give something and then take it back. I mean, what are you... person that...
A person that what?
Well, a person that gives something and then they're dissatisfied and they wish they had never given it to the person that they originally gave it to.
You mean like an Indian giver?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term.
So when he uses the term Indian giver, which I've never actually heard of, you see that this offends the girl that he's with, which kind of makes some sense. But then you see that he censors a word like reservation, even though he's using it in the context of I'm making dinner reservations. And that's how the word becomes funny, even though you could say that he was having reservations to use that word. Okay? So in this Fine Brothers video, they're talking about how like this controversial joke is insensitive and offensive, and yet they never really talk about whether the actual shows hold up, rather than this could be offensive in today's modern life. Like, really? That's ridiculous. So does Seinfeld hold up? That's the big question. To get to the point, I do think that the show holds up quite well, actually. My only negative with this show is the fact that it has that awful laugh track that you see with 90s sitcoms. That is just kind of something you have to deal with when you watch these kind of shows, unfortunately. But fortunately, it's not like a Big Bang Theory where there's a lot of unfunny jokes being laughed at in the laugh track. Most of these jokes actually are funny, so you kind of laugh with it instead of like just sitting there bored. It's not all the time, but you just have to deal with laugh tracks. It just is it's a product of its time. But the reason I actually like the episodes that I watched, and I'm looking forward to watching more of the show, is because the writing is so good. It doesn't necessarily feel like I'm watching something in the 90s, where a lot of those shows were hit or miss. I mean, there's a couple of moments where there's things referenced to like TV guides, or there's the moment where Jerry gets his first 2-line phone, which nobody is really worried about in 2018. But other than the things that date the show because of just the fact that it's a 90s show, Seinfeld's writing does a great job of making episodes about trivial, stupid shit that are interesting and funny and timeless. Seinfeld is basically a slice of life show, which is what I would have named this episode of Your Everyday Nerd if I wasn't trying to piggyback off of analytics and the YouTube algorithm. Basically, slice of life is commonly used in the anime community more than TV shows, but it refers to a genre of entertainment where nothing big really ever happens. Like, there's no earth-shattering moments that cause characters to change and evolve. Instead, it's about the little moments in life. It's about the character interactions. It's about a group of friends who make a bet to see who can last the longest without playing with their pee-pee. Like, it's like you're watching a show about your friends doing stupid shit. The only difference is that these people are a little bit funnier than your friends. This show also stands out compared to a lot of other sitcoms, especially 90s sitcoms, because a lot of sitcoms usually have episodes that encourage positive outcomes and learning from your situations and character growth, which is nice and it's wholesome, and it'd be nice if people actually did that in real life, but they don't. Instead, we get a show like Seinfeld, which takes situations that the characters put themselves into because of wrong decisions and bad behavior, and instead of learning from the situation like a lot of sitcoms do, they end up just getting consequences that you don't really expect, but you're like, yeah, they kind of deserve that. It's like Karma, the show. Apparently, this is a really important part of Larry David's writing, the writer of Seinfeld, who then goes on to write Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is an even bigger part of this writing. And again, I still need to watch that show as well. But it's really cool to see how these consequences end up playing out at the end of the episode, usually where 2 to 3 plot lines even are meshed together to sometimes cause chaos. It makes for a funny ending, which is a lot different than other sitcoms that usually just show you a happily ever after, like wholesome, heartwarming ending, which gets tiring after a while. Sometimes you just want to laugh. I could probably talk more about the show, but I really want to actually see more of it before I talk about like the intricacies and whether season 1 is better than season 9. I don't know. But what's cool is you don't necessarily need to watch this show episodic, because every single episode kind of has like the same feel to it with a different consequence, different situation. Like in season 3, Jerry is a single guy in his 30s who's a comedian. And then in season 9, Jerry's still a single guy in his 30s that's a comedian. Not a whole lot of character growth happens. I'm sure there's like some things that's going to be consequential, like in the minor details, like real life, but there's nothing like big where Jerry becomes like a famous comedian instead of just a minor comedian at the end of this season. Unless you think of it in the macro scale of things, where Jerry does kind of become a famous comedian in real life after Seinfeld. So yeah, at the end of the day, FBE people, you're wrong, because this show is good. You just happen to have a bad taste in comedy because the show is funny, and yeah, it still holds up.
Are you still master of your domain?
I'm queen of the castle.
That's all the time we have for today. If you liked the video, go and hit that like button. If you want to see me do more videos like this in reaction to the FBE videos that are going to come out, because Maybe they'll quit the show after 1 episode since it got so many dislikes. Maybe they won't. So if more episodes come out, I'll be sure to do like kind of reaction things, especially if it's something I've never seen before. If for whatever reason you disliked it, I guess you can hit the dislike button. Go ahead and subscribe for more episodes of Your Everyday Nerd. I have a couple of bangers coming out in the next week, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Goodbye.